So this will be archived so people can watch it later then, in other words, right?
Yes, what you just said will too.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
So this is the fourth episode of the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. And I'm Kharmah with Simon Says Booking and Engage Your Fanbase. And I'm here with Freakbase. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, yes. Me and all my friends.
Yes, your bobblehead friends.
Yes.
We called my daughter Bubbles the bobblehead when she was first born.
Uh-huh.
Her body was 10 percentile and her head was the 60th percentile.
Oh, right, yeah.
So anyway, today we're here to talk about, this is driving me nuts. Today we're here to talk about CD releases, and you have a big CD release coming out. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yeah, you got a little weird echo thing, not like before, but
I took the earphones out.
Oh, okay.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's actually better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got a big CD coming out. Why don't you tell us about that first?
Well, this is going to be our first release with Rope-A-Dope since signing with them, which I'm real excited about. It's a very new process for me because I'm not used to having someone else do a lot of this marketing type things and, manufacturing and supplying radio stations, all this stuff. So it's new and exciting, but it's just kind of a new learning curve for me because I've been doing so many independent albums for so many years that this is a kind of new way of doing things. So it's exciting to see how someone else is going to, tap into what they do. So, but the record I'm really excited about. I'm working in with Dwayne Lundy, who produced the last album, Everybody's Feeling Real. Like I mentioned in a lot of the press releases, Dwayne and I know each other a lot better now than we did on the last album. So our comfort level in the studio and how quick we can work together in the studio is a lot easier than it was in the first record because we were kind of filling each other out on that first album. The other thing that I think is we have been touring a lot since, like the first record, I hadn't been touring very much. And so I was kind of doing that record to kind of start going up and touring again. Where this album, for the last year and a half, 2 years, we've been hitting it really hard on the road. Yeah. So a lot of these songs we've got to work through live a lot. We've got to do a lot of pre-production, like when we're in the hotel and we're stuck in the middle of Montana for a couple of days. We'd work on the songs for the record. So we were basically really prepared when we went in the studio to record this album, which I think made the process a lot more efficient, if nothing else,
So what have you seen the differences? Phil was talking to me about when you used to be in Shag, right? The bar band that you used to be. What is the difference in the music industry that you've seen that changes since then? Like how has your career evolved since then? And like, how has this whole process evolved since then? I mean, you're talking about having Rope-A-Dope do all this marketing for you, and you're doing a lot on your own, so it's not like you're sitting back on your laurels. But
right, which is, I think, one of the reasons like an independent label like Rope-A-Dope are interested in artists like me too. It's kind of a two-way street type thing. I mean, obviously, the biggest change since like my Shag days is the social media aspect of everything. I would say there was internet, obviously. Then it was late 90s when Shag was kind of hitting. So we were still kind of starting to tap into that. But now, you're tapping into so many different, you can pinpoint the kind of your fan base a lot easier than you were able to, especially online, than you were one time, whether it be through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever the case may be. And I love it. I think it's really exciting because you can have that more one-on-one interaction with your fans as opposed to just kind of putting this generic kind of things out there. Yeah.
How much of that do you do yourself?
I do some. Rope-A-Dope does some. Obviously, you guys help us out with that too, as well as certain things. So the biggest thing is having your fans or your people that follow you on these networks. Those help more than anything because then they can kind of share it within their whole little community too as well. So I remember when I first was talking to Rope-A-Dope, they were saying, likes are all great and it makes you feel good. Like, oh, somebody liked my thing, and that's great. But the main thing that actually the biggest helps are when you see stuff shared. So
Yeah.
on like Facebook, the most powerful thing is when stuff is shared. So that's kind of what you want to go. You know, likes are great, but you see, you know, when you have your own page on Facebook, you can see exactly the interaction, and
Mm-hmm.
when people share it, it goes up. So like you could even have, you know, 20 or 30 likes, and you could have like 5,000 people looking at your thing because there's so many shares. You know, so it's that the likes are nice, but it doesn't necessarily go with how many people are actually seeing your thing in their news feeds.
So would you say that's a pretty major goal of your marketing of a CD would be those shares? I mean, that's pretty much what you're looking for, is that word of mouth, interactive, viral aspect. How is that different than you know, the first time you put out a CD? What's the first CD you put out?
My first one came out in 2001, which was called Body of the Mind. So it was obviously internet, you know, this is like, even like, I don't even know if MySpace was around yet. I think MySpace started in 2002 or 2003. It might've been the very, very early days of MySpace. But, you know, I still think, you know, even if you go back to, you know, even before both of our time, I still think word of mouth is and always will be and always was in the past the strongest thing. And people are so barraged with this, you know, I mean, the internet's a great, exciting thing, but there's so much out there. So it's, how do you filter through all that stuff? And I know I'm more likely to check something out, especially musically, if someone I like says, hey, have you heard blah, 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 or so-and-so, versus then if I'm getting this thing sponsored link showing up through my newsfeed all the time too as well. So I still think word of mouth, it's still old, you know, yes, it's a new technology, but word of mouth is still the most powerful thing, you know, whether it be movies, music, books, or whatever, you know.
So knowing that you are definitely on that bandwagon, which I agree with you completely, where do your videos fit into that? Because they're very shareable.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've always been kind of a visual person, so that's one of them. That when I remember when I first started getting into music as a kid, the music was part of it, and then seeing the artists too was like another part. Like you actually seeing them perform, because they were like magicians, you know. And so that, getting back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that's the only thing is weird for me for the internet, because I don't like seeing the man behind the curtain. You know, if I was going to Oz, I would want to see the big green guy. I wouldn't want to necessarily find out how the ending was. You know, I like that aspect. When I go to a show, I don't want to necessarily, like, I would, you know, if I would have been around back when Bowie was performing in like '72 with Ziggy Stardust, I don't know if I'd want to see him backstage getting his makeup on and doing that kind of stuff. I just would want to see like the finished product type thing. So kind of leading that back to what we were talking about in the videos. You know, artists like that, David Bowie, David Byrne from the Talking Heads, you know, obviously in the funk world, George Clinton, you know, with the Mothership and Bootsy and people like that. Those are always been the people I've been kind of drawn to, because to me, music's always multimedia, and the more multimedia you can be, I think it just works better, at least for me, not for everybody, but for me. And videos are a huge part of that. So, I'm always thinking, you know, even when I write music, I'm always thinking visually. So it kind of works together how it goes. Although the videos don't necessarily always reflect what the initial thought was. Like, if you look like a video like Mama's Like a Cowboy, that's definitely wasn't what I was thinking about when we wrote that song. That was a video. But I was like, that works. You know, the guys came up with that concept, you know, and that's the most talked about video I have now.
Well,
so check it out if you haven't seen it, by the way.
Yeah, you should. It's a great video. You've got a lot of great videos, but you're kind of talking about the presentation and the show aspect of the show business. And you and I were talking earlier about Periscope, and a lot of people are using Periscope to like break down those walls, and that works for a lot of musicians. But I think you're saying that that's really not kind of. I mean, are you using Periscope at all?
Yeah, I have, and we've done it on the road like quite a bit, you know, like especially going between. Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of the most part of the curtain that is kind of cool to tear down a little bit, is to see, you know, pulling into a truck stop and seeing this beautiful mountain in the middle of Montana that you might not normally see, or all those things that you don't see in different parts of our day, that, you know, you just, a lot of times people just think that part of your whole life is that, you know, 2 hours you're on stage, but they don't realize you're traveling hours and hours and hours. sometimes very boring, but sometimes very beautiful, especially when you go out west. I mean, it's amazing. We went to we played in Glacier State National Park this year in Montana, and so we got a chance. We had a couple of days off, so we got to go to see Old Faithful and all this kind of stuff. So we periscoped that, and so that's a pretty cool thing, and that's something that I do think is, I don't really think of that as like necessarily pulling the curtain back either. That's just kind of experiencing what you're experiencing, So hope that makes sense.
Well, it's allowing people to connect with you on a personal level. Say
it again.
It's allowing people to connect with you on a personal level.
Yes, yeah, and that's important, I think, because our best shows are the ones where the audience almost becomes another member of the band, and we might, one song that maybe was written for that 4 or 5 minutes long ends up being 20-25 minutes long, and it's because what's the interaction, the feeling we're getting from the audience. So they are really a part of the band as much as you are. So your fan base is part of the band. So you want them to be on tour with you. So and that's Periscope's a great way to take your whole fan base on tour with you, throw them in the van too, and they can go and see all the cool things that you're seeing. And sometimes the not so cool things too. There's a lot of that out there too.
I imagine there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about the process. So, and I'm sure it's very different this time around, but for musicians who are coming out with their first or second album, a lot of times it seems to me musicians are like, they got their head down and they're like, I'm going to make this album and that's all I'm going to do. And then, oh, by the way, I've got this album and you should listen to it, instead of that whole process that needs to happen beforehand. And I'm wondering what you've done in the past that has made your releases successful. Have you done a lot of that pre-work?
Yeah, and I think it's a build too. We want, a lot of times as artists, when you like, if say release, whatever the release day is, you like want everything to happen that day. Like, oh my gosh, everybody, this is the best thing ever. This is better than Sgt. Pepper's, or whatever. And it's always, even for albums like Sgt. Pepper's on the Hearts Club Band and stuff like that, it's always a gradual build. And that's where I think touring mixed with the social media thing and all that kind of, there's just really no shortcuts for that. Any band you see, especially in the scene that we're in, you can trace it back. Like, it may seem like they were like, wow, they just kind of got big overnight. But then when you kind of really start kind of doing your homework, oh no, they've been on the road for the last 4 or 5 years, like hitting it hard, So there's, and you got to kind of keep at it too. Like with me, I actually kind of took a little time off. I took about 1.5 years, 2 years off. And then I kind of did a side project, which is me and a DJ called Freak Pot for a while. Great stuff. And it really inspired me musically. But when I came out again with Everybody's Feeling Real last 1.5 years, it wasn't like I was starting over from scratch. But definitely I had to kind of build up a lot of new markets again because I hadn't been there in so long that you have to kind of start that whole process kind of over again. So you really got to commit to, it's almost like running for president or something like that. I mean, you really got to like spend time in these different markets and then festivals, and they kind of keep building off of each thing. And that in turn goes back to the CD release thing. I mean, you would be able to answer some of this with me, but I think, now when I put the last CD out, it was kind of, I wasn't a new artist, but I hadn't been out there a lot lately. And it was kind of like getting people to like convince you, like, okay, hey, check this out, have me on your show, let me come on your radio show. Where this time it's so people know what the product of the person is, and it's a little bit easier because they know they've either seen you live or they've heard about you through the buzz. And it's a lot easier to kind of make those inroads quicker for those type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you're talking about staying in people's consciousness, it's really important to stay in their consciousness throughout that whole recording process. I mean, you were touring and I'm assuming recording at the same time, or in between, correct. Or when did you fit this in? Because I mean, you've been touring. Well,
we just have to block out sections of time, and what we would do was great with Dwayne's. His studio was also like this big, huge house, so we would stay there for like Monday through Saturday or Monday through Friday when we were getting ready to go, sleep there and everything, and we'd just be recording 24/7 throughout the day. So you got everything. So we would knock out huge chunks at a time, and then get on that van again on Thursday or Friday, and then head off to the next city, and then come back, like that type of thing. So we did this relatively quick. The album, the last album I'm actually kind of still technically touring for. Everybody's Feeling Real. It's like that album's really not that old. It's barely a year old. So to me, it's kind of neat to already have a new album already in the can. And I want to kind of keep that process going because, back in the day, back in, Elton John and David Bowie and, early Talking Heads and all these bands we're talking about, those guys were like so prolific. I mean, they were putting out, 2 or 3 albums a year, it seemed like, during their, and people just want to see more, get more stuff, so hopefully we'll keep on the same trajectory.
Well, I think that the touring and the marketing that goes along with that touring seems to me would go very far towards doing what you were saying, which was keeping in people's minds.
Correct.
Keeping that consciousness.
It. Yeah.
So that's
and people really ultimately want to see, as good as an album is, people ultimately want to see it perform live or see you perform live, so it used to be, it seemed like, you would read stories where, like, say back in the 70s or the 80s, where you were touring to ultimately promote the album. Now I think it's almost the opposite. I think the album is to promote the live show,
Yeah. Well, the live show is where you're making your money these days.
Well, there's that too. That's a huge part of it too, as well. Yeah, that's a big thing. That's why certain bands like Pretty Lights, for instance, gives all their stuff away, and so it's all based off of what they do off of their live show. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about giving stuff away, but certainly I think streaming certainly gives artists a way to connect with fans and get them into their shows without, it's like that trial period, and you.
Yeah.
And then
Another thing I think I found is real interesting. I'm finding more and more people at shows that find out about us through places like Spotify. I mean, I hear that. Seems like every few weeks I'm out like, oh yeah, I looked you guys up on Spotify and heard about you, and so I knew I had to come to the show. So that's kind of cool too, because that's something that, I mean, Spotify is not, I mean, it's kind of social media-esque, I guess, but it's more of just a streaming side, obviously. So, but there's that kind of social media aspect of that now,
Yeah, that's great. Let's see, what else did I have? So I wanted to talk to you about this process of disseminating content, because you have a lot of content. You have videos. You just released the single. So how does that look, and how has that changed over time? Pre-release, post-release. Does that make my question make sense to you?
I think. Give me a little bit more.
Well, like you're teasing people with the single, and then
right.
And then you've got the video that's going to come out and that kind of thing. I mean, that's all pre-planned and
sure.
a part of the process, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because we keep kind of comparing old day to new day, and that is kind of similar. Back in the day, the people would, you'd hear the single, and then the video would come out, and then it's like, okay, I gotta get the record now, So, and that's kind of the way it goes. I think though the interesting way is trying to decide which song is the single too. That's always kind of a weird process too. It was kind of a combination between us and what Rope-A-Dope was interested in, and that song that we released as a single, and this one, Put in a Letter, was had this kind of quirkiness about it that hopefully with the harmonica and just the kind of bouncy groove to it that hopefully will at least get people kind of hooked in a little bit to maybe want to listen to the rest of the album too as well. Even that the rest of the album, there's similar things, but there's obviously a lot of different variety than that from the album.
And Put It in a Letter is available on SoundCloud right now, right?
That's correct. Yeah, just go to SoundCloud/Freekbass, FREKBASS, and that. You can see a bunch of other stuff from past material too as well.
So do you have a video in the works?
Yes, we're for this one too, Put It in a Letter. And then there's a tune off the album that the guys that did Mama's Like a Cowboy, it's called I Know That I'm Gonna Get Your Love Tonight, that I think then we might be doing for that one too. We're still talking to them which the next is going to be, but Put in a Letter we're working on right now. Yeah.
And do you is there a whole production crew? I mean, how are you making these videos? I mean, they're very, very, very professional. Do you have a whole
right. Well, on the last album, what I did is I talked to it was all different people for different, each one, each video had a different production crew. The guys that did Mama's Like a Cowboy, they had kind of put their name on the map. They had done this video for Primus about a year before that. And I kind of knew them from shows. They're from Louisville, Kentucky. And so we had always talked about working together. And they said they listened to the album and they're like, we'd love to do a song for Mama's Like a Cowboy. And then they kind of told me the whole concept. And I was like, sounds great, you know. And then on each one, I think Victoria Thunder was our first video. And this is a director named Todd Mendel. He's the head of video out of Notre Dame University. He liked that tune a lot. He's like, we should do a video for this. So the directors kind of talked to about it. And then finally the Never Enough, which was the last one we did, which is one that's kind of like we're in the insane asylum. The director, Gary Templeton, he kind of came up with that concept too as well, you know? So, you know, and then we kind of just build off that brainstorm and build off that too as well. So I'm always, the crazier and the more over the top, I'm always about it. So it doesn't take a whole lot of arm twisting with me to go that direction.
Well, and video is so the center of how people, I mean, you're talking about people finding you on Spotify. How many people have found you on YouTube? Well,
exactly. That's YouTube. Perfect. I mean, yeah, I hear that constantly, you know, okay. People, that's the first, and I'm the first person if I hear about a band, 99% of the time, I'm going to YouTube them first and see what it's about, you know, YouTube them or Wikipedia, I'm one of the two. And then that's it. Yeah.
That's what my kids do.
Yeah. The other thing is, getting back to the things today, when doing videos, now you have to kind of think in terms of things being this big too. So when we're making the videos, you know, it used to be you're watching on a TV screen back when we were kids with MTV days, but now, you know, most people are, I mean, I'm watching them on my phone most of the time. So you kind of think in those dimensions all the time, you know? And so when we're monitoring stuff, we're always, as a matter of fact, the Everybody's Feeling Real, the video, which Ted Mandel did, which was the last video, it's pretty neat. It's one that's got a bunch of cameos in it. It's actually of people doing like the whole video is a selfie. So it's actually a thing of the film, that was Ted's idea. And I thought it was like genius, you know, because that's what we're all watching stuff. So it makes the video looks like you're watching on a selfie, which is kind of neat. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I'm really glad that there's going to be more videos on the way because I enjoy them.
Of course, yeah.
And so what about the creative process in terms of your, you know, the merchandising and all of that stuff that goes along with your CD release? I mean, how much of that have you been doing?
Well, like I mentioned, for this one, it's interesting because, you know, in terms of the actual product of the CD, that's something that Rope-A-Dope does, and then we actually get back from them, which is kind of, again, a new process. You know, T-shirts, obviously. I'm sorry?
Did you pick out the artwork and all that, or
yes.
Did they?
Yeah, and we sent them over to them and let them made sure it looked within their things and stuff. But yeah. So we did all the artwork, got all the artwork done, put it back to them. They do everything through like a Google Drive. You basically upload it to a Google Drive, and that's how you talk back and forth too, which is a whole new process too. Learning how to use Google Drive, which is interesting. It's great thing too. It is. Yeah, it's like unlimited space, and it's a really good way to communicate in terms of when you're doing big projects. In terms of big, you know, need a lot of space. And then, you know, we're going to, of course, do the old T-shirts. You know, we've got T-shirts we've been selling on the road. We try to change the designs every few months to get people variety. But I mean, that's the best advertising in the world. People walking around with your name on their chest. And one thing I'm actually getting into right now that we're going to get here soon, which we're kind of getting hipster again, are buttons.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more kids with those on, and I kind of like them. You know, back like the little ones you put on your jacket and stuff like that. So I think we're going to get some buttons done up here soon and we'll have those for the CD release party as well.
Good. And speaking of CD release party, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it's coming up in just a few weeks. It's going to be Friday, November 27th at the Southgate House Revival. For those in the area, it's a Cincinnati market, but it's actually in Kentucky. Cincinnati's almost like a twin city if you're not from here. There's Cincinnati, then there's Newport and Covington, which are right next. I mean, it's where you walk across the bridge and it's there. So the Southgate is in Newport, Kentucky. The cool thing about the CD release party is the album actually doesn't get released till December 11th nationally, but we talked to Rope-A-Dope about, since the name of the album is Cincinnati, which I don't know if I mentioned that yet, that's the name of the album. It'd be cool on our CD release. Could we get them a couple weeks in advance just for this CD release party? So they're going to rush drop ship. So just for this release party, since it is Cincinnati, we're going to have that little specialty of having the actual hard copies of CDs for sale there. So So it should be good. And there's a great band from Cincinnati called the Almighty Get Downs opening, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard so many great things about. I mean, they're a big like horn funk band. They got a real good buzz around here now. So I'm excited about seeing them as much as I am playing. So it should be a really good night. Yeah, it's a day after Thanksgiving, so hopefully people are ready to get out, and hopefully some people that might not have been in town too will be in town too, that you might have moved out to different parts of the country. Will be here too as well.
So I just wanted to wrap up with, for musicians who are watching and want to release their own CD and want to do it efficiently and effectively, do you have any tips to, some words of advice, some sage words of advice?
Well, for the CD itself, try to have as much pre-production before you go in the studio. Like, don't try to get in the studio and try to think it's all going to just come together there. You want to have all the songs written, or at least a good chunk of them written. You want some creative things to happen in the studio. But the more prepared you already go in the studio, it's going to be better. You're not going to be wasting your money or the engineer's money or their time or anything. And it's just going to be a way better process. One thing, time back into the Rope-A-Dope thing, that is real interesting. This album's done now. It was done a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. But Rope-A-Dope has a 60 days leadway before they even release. So in other words, October 10th, I think, was when it was done, 10th or 11th, and it's not getting released till December 11th. And that's all from the prep and building up the story and doing all the things that we're doing right now. So whether you're going through a label, you're going independently, that's a great lesson to just, there's always that temptation. Okay, I got it in my hand. Let's just get it out there and just start getting to people. But you want to kind of make it a gradual burn. So people you build up to when the day it actually gets released. So I think that's kind of a cool thing too, as well, to, even if you're releasing it yourself independently, kind of have that blueprint in mind, have it really planned out when you're going to release it and what outlets you're going to do, release a single like we did, to try to get a little early buzz for it and then kind of build out from there.
Very good advice. I've been a part of CD releases where we're literally burning CDs because they just finished. So. Oh,
I've many times I've been in that boat.
It's
yeah, sure.
It's really stressful.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. I really appreciate it. And the Southgate House Revival show will be November 27th.
Yep.
Right?
You got it.
That's awesome. First chance for anybody to get a exclusive sneak peek for the locals to the new CD Cincinnati. So this has been Freakbase, and I'm Kara Kharmah, and this is the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. You can follow me at Kara Kharmah on Twitter or on Periscope, where I scope live music every weekend at LMN&R. That's Live Music News and Review. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to be talking with Force of the Optimistics, which will be really cool. And we're going to be talking about how to build a tribe around build the family around your fan base as kind of an interactive family unit. Does that make sense? I'm not introducing it very well, but they've got a very special fan base, and it should be an interesting conversation about how they have really built their fan base by creating those kinds of personal interactions. So,
very cool.
Thank you so much for your time, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Sounds good. Bye, Kara.